Morning, everyone. Morning. It's Jonathan Crisp here from Barnell. Welcome, everyone, and welcome, Michael Davies. We're very chuffed to have Michael present to us today. Just a little bit of housekeeping. Everyone will be muted for now, but you can place comments in the chat, which Cheryl and I will be looking at. And then at the end, there'll be questions and answers that will allow, we'll have a Q&A session. And also quite exciting, we're going to have Michael set up a poll during this presentation. So we're going to be doing a poll on that, on a few questions. Michael is the CEO of Pax Resilience. Spent many years and got lots of experience in resilience, risk, strategy. So it's really great to have you, Michael. I'm sitting here in load shedding. I think Joburg's getting to about 33 today. There's no aircon. The Mozzie mats didn't work last night, so because of load shedding as well. So all these little knock-on effects. I know I'm like a spoiled brat here with the aircon and Mozzie mats, but yeah, when you get used to things. But as we'll go through, you'll see that, even though none of us expect a total blackout or grid blackout, the effects of load shedding is severe, on the economy. And Michael's going to take us through just some of these things. So we're really hoping, also for some solutions and that next year hopefully we can turn the corner with some of this load shedding, although I don't, I think Michael will comment on that. So let me not steal the thunder, but I'm going to hand over to Michael. And thank you very much for joining us.
Excellent. Thanks, Jono. Hello, Jono. Mosquito, but not Jono. Yeah, thanks, Jono. Thanks to Barnell for the privilege to actually just discuss the topic today, which I think is very pertinent. We all feel at the moment. So welcome to everyone, and thank you for making the time to listen in. I'm just going to fire up the presentation. Bear with me a sec. I think I'll put it on the wrong screen again. Right. I think we're good to go. So yes, national grid failure, but never mind the national grid failure. What about the effect of continued severe load shedding on organisations? So Eskom has played its part for me today, because going back into stage 4 load shedding really brings it back home. Everyone notices that traffic lights don't work, aircons don't work. You just feel it in your individual life, but also as a business. For the discussion this morning, I will talk about national grid failure, but the focus areas is what about continued load shedding? What about severe load shedding, which we'll get into? So just in terms of where we're at is, again, most of us have lived through this, so graphs like this come as no surprise. The top right graph, and please note that the data there, it actually reflects 2023 as at April 2023. So it was catching up to 2022 very quickly. And as Business Tech said a short while back, 2023 has already had the most load shedding in history. And the bar chart to the left, at the bottom left, again, it just represents over the years how load shedding has increased, or in case our power availability has deteriorated. And please also note that we have touched into stage 5 and 6. So while we get lulled into a false sense of security at stage 2 and stage 1, and in fact, it's actually quite funny that stages 1 and 2 load shedding become a sort of a way of life that we've normalized it. And it's only when we hit stage 4 and above that we really get concerned again. But it's load shedding is with us. Load curtailment for organisations that have load curtailment agreements with Eskom, and it's with us for the foreseeable future for many reasons. So let's talk about some of the reasons why we don't see an easy out of load shedding. Now, Eskom has 11 national disaster priority risks, and a national blackout is only one of them. If we look at the priority risk areas that Eskom are making contingency plans for, and I stress up front that I think Eskom's been very proactive in terms of its contingency planning and planning around load shedding. In fact, they're getting very good at load shedding. But from the perspective of maintaining at least a supply of, Eskom have been very good. But let's just consider some of the other risks to availability of power. So we've got the obvious, which is the severe supply demand constraint, which is most of the reason for our load shedding. We had a pandemic, which we've lived through, and it also had an impact on service in terms of Eskom and power to the people. A national blackout, which we will discuss. Other areas of risks for us as end consumers, but for Eskom to deliver electricity to our offices, to our homes, is national industrial action, a cyber attack or catastrophic IT system failure. Now, the whole thing of operational technology is becoming quite a big thing, where hackers get into systems. Generally, it's in terms of mechanical systems, but if you've got automated systems and a hacker gets in, it's very vulnerable to all sorts of malicious behavior. So cyber attacks is definitely a key priority risk as well. Then we have national droughts or floods. From a drought perspective, we've got hydropower in certain areas, so that has an impact on supply. And floods can be catastrophically damaging. So we have issues in that. Nuclear incidents, we do have Koeberg, so not necessarily Koeberg itself going up, but a nuclear incident would also hamper the current availability of electricity. Then environmental and climate change incidents. And over the years, we've seen on the World Economic Forum risk reports, it's been there for some time. The climate change and environmental changes has an impact on the world, and it also impacts South Africa. So climate change incidents and the extreme weather conditions also impacts the supply of electricity. Economic or financial collapse, again, as a country risk, we're at risk of economic collapse at times, and in fact of state failure, which will impact how Eskom operates as well. And then slightly out there, but we always thought a pandemic was out there, so maybe I should take that back. Slightly out there is solar geomagnetic storms, and then terrorism and political instability. Well, not so much out there anymore. Political instability, we've got elections coming up next year, just around the corner. So there's going to be all sorts of politicking going on, which possibly increases the risk of this one. So there we have 11 areas that Eskom are looking at. And sadly, if a national blackout is listed as one of these priority risks, but should one of those other risks or a number of them materialize, it will probably then heighten the risk of a national blackout. So I just wanted to make it clear that the threat of a national grid failure or severe load shedding is not just based on supply and demand. There are other reasons for things happening that will then realize in a risk of a national blackout or increased load shedding. So just some food for thought there. And then I spoke of Eskom and saying that they have done a lot of work around this. So in terms of a national grid failure, is what's Eskom's state of readiness? So if we look at the Eskom disaster plan, it's in place, it's updated. It includes those 11 national disaster risks that I've just gone through. And its tabletop reviews are done, and it's practiced at a tabletop level. So Eskom is very sensitive to the risks it face, and they do consider them very deeply. In terms of the blackout, well, a national blackout still remains highly unlikely. However, catastrophic, very high impact event should it happen to individuals and the country and businesses, obviously. In terms of warning, and this is always the scary part, is that everyone wants to know, well, can we get some warning so we can prepare for a national blackout? Well, unfortunately, due to the causes which may trigger a national blackout, it is highly unlikely that there will be any warning. If any warning, it will be a short warning. And in terms of how Eskom deals with the risks it has and the lack of capacity, well, we're all very aware of the stages 1 to 8 load shedding that's in place. And so there's also load curtailment for organisations that have the agreements with Eskom. And to be noted that NERSA, so the National Energy Regulator, has proposed to increase those stages 1 to 16. And we'll discuss those as well as we go through this. There is a plan in place should there be a national grid failure. There is a restoration plan. There's a 3-phase plan that Eskom goes through. So that's also well considered. And in terms of the restoration, the 3 phases Eskom will go through, it's a very detailed and intentional process as it goes through. So maybe some light at the end of the tunnel. I'm full of bad news this morning, but some light at the end of the tunnel is that there is contingency planning around it. Unfortunately, from a country perspective, we do not have a country plan in terms of a national grid failure. Provinces may have their own plans in place, but we don't have something in place for the country. So, from a South African perspective, we obviously all up in arms about load shedding and how it affects our lives. But are we the only ones? So if we look at other countries that have had national grid failures, and this is by no means an extensive list. I mean, there's been certain states in the United States that have had failures. There's been portions of India. So there have been a number of areas that have had outages and national grid failures. But just to make us feel a little bit better and have a bit of commiseration here is other countries have had outages. What's encouraging as well is that if you look at the outage, in most instances, it's an outage for 24 hours, maybe 48 hours, and then restoration comes back into play. So longer term, Puerto Rico had outage for 5 days caused by fire. But for the rest of it, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Argentina, Botswana, it was all out for a relatively short period. So that's that's just to point out that we're not alone in this. So these countries have had national grid failures. So what's it like? So if we were to envision a scenario where we have a national grid failure in South Africa, so we see the lights are out, what would happen? And again, this is by no means an extensive list. It is just thought-provoking in terms of some of the things to consider. So one of the things that won't be working very soon are the telecommunications. So Vodacom, MTN have publicly said that in the case of a national grid failure, is that between 4 and 8 hours, the telecom stations, the towers stop operating. And within a day, it'll be very difficult to communicate. Businesses have considered alternatives, satellite phones using Starlink and things like that. But the scenario is that in a national grid failure, you will have close to zero communication capability. Another scary element of a scenario of a national grid failure is the provision of water. Actually caused by load shedding is in a number of communities, there's been lack of water because reservoirs need power to pump water into gravity-fed towers, such that the water then is distributed to communities, to businesses, to offices. And this is treated water, so this is drinking water, cleaning water. So in terms of a national grid failure, water is not getting pumped to these towers, and there'll be no provision of water. So we'll use up what's available, and then we'll be battling for availability of water. The other side of it is the treatment plants for sewage, wastewater. They too need power. And while they have contingency plans, and some have generators and some have means to continue, it's a limited capacity to continue. And our water system is in a fragile state already. Without adding load shedding and national grid failure, is that there have been diseases that have broken out in various areas, largely due to polluted water. Now, if you can imagine the current state, but much worse in terms of the pollution in the water. So the health issues or health crises come to play in this as well. Then the financial markets. The financial markets are, well, where do I start? I mean, you can start with equities and the stock exchange and so on, and all the financial institutions around it and how they're going to be affected. But what about you as an individual? Just consider going to, whether you shop at Spar, Woolies, OK, Checkers, and you go in and you want a trolley load of food, but you get to the end point. But if there's no connectivity, if the towers aren't working, how are you going to pay for that trolley full of food? The point of sale might be up because they have their own generators and backup systems in place. But if there's no connectivity to banks, how's it all going to work? And very simple illustrations. So from a financial perspective, it's up to the markets, but also to the individual and businesses transacting. Becomes very difficult. And then we have social unrest, disobedience. We've already seen on a couple of occasions the opportunistic element of looting, of violence, of striking. And there's a couple of different elements to it. I mean, one is the looting, but the other one is also unrest and striking due to lack of service delivery. If you consider all the other things going on, municipalities are not going to be able to provide the services they normally do. And that's then going to lead to a very high degree of discontent in the communities. So that's sort of a bit of a scenario play on national grid failure. And it's always nice to take to extremes, because we can look at extremes. One extreme being we have 100% provision of power all day, every day, and life is good. And we can understand and relate to how we operate in that environment. It's also good to see the other extreme as to, well, what happens if there's a national grid failure, and what are the considerations that we should be planning for? And then with load shedding, we know it's somewhere in between those two that we have to be preparing ourselves for. So in terms of that is what are those phases in between national grid failure and 100% power provision? We've now had a couple of years of load shedding, so I'm sure everyone's fairly au fait with how load shedding works. I'm just going to quickly go through it and then summarize it, just for the fact that we then take it into the next part of the discussion as well. So in terms of the first 4 stages of load shedding, is that we work on cycles of, so it's a 4-day cycle or an 8-day cycle. And in stage 1, you'll have 3 outages in a 4-day cycle, and they'll be 2 hours long. Or in an 8-day cycle, we might have 3 outages of 4 hours long. Ultimately, whether it's a 4-day cycle or an 8-day cycle, it means that we'll have power available for 94% of the time. And so it goes. So for the first 4 stages, you either have a 4-day cycle, 8-day cycle. And on the right-hand side in the green, you can see, based on that stage, how much power you'll have available during a cycle. So these cycles can change, as as we know. And, you know, we just then factoring in, you know, how much power do we have during the cycle. So that's stages 1 to 4. If we consider stages 5 to 8, here we just had 4-day cycles. That's what it is. At stage 5, we effectively have 69% power available in a 4-day cycle, and it might be through 9 outages of 2 hours long, or it might be 3 outages of 4 hours long. So there are various permutations in terms of the load shedding. That's why we all get confused as to, you know, what day we're on. Is our load shedding from 6 till 8 tonight, or is it from 12 till 4? Because Eskom can play around with the various cycles. So at worst, currently, on our load shedding at stage 8, we effectively have power for 50% of the time in a cycle. That's what we end up with. So just to summarize where we're at then, is the load shedding stages. Let's say at stage 1, we'll have power 94% of the time. And at stage 8, we'll only have it for 50% of that cycle. And I've brought back that graph that shows load shedding over the years and also the severity. So as you will see, on the right-hand side in 2022, the load shedding moves from a sort of an amber to an orange to a red, and then they ran out of redness, so they eventually ended up with some pink color for stage 6 and 5. So we're looking at how long we have power for in a stage, and then also the frequency of load shedding. So the trend has been that it's getting worse. Right. So that's quick explanation of load shedding, and it brings it into this. So the great thing about information share is, I believe there's value in the group, the collective experience and knowledge of people. So we'll be going into a survey. There are 3 questions that I would like you to answer. I'm going to go through the 3 questions, and then we'll go into the survey. So the first question, so the scenario is we are currently at stage 8 load shedding for a period of 1 week. So if we pop back here, load shedding is at stage 8, so we only have power for 50% of the time. What I ask of you is if you could rank the risk categories below in order of priority for your organization. So if today you know that we're going into 1 week of stage 8 load shedding, you only have power for 50% of the time, where would you prioritize amongst these things? So the first one would be communications, data and voice. Would it be lack of availability of fresh potable water? Health crises? Would you be concerned about employees being sick? Is it the financial markets and being able to do transactions? Or is it the security and social unrest element of it? So I've obviously tied it back to the scenario I played a bit earlier. So when you get the chance to go into the survey, please rank it. So you'll go from 1 to 5, but rank it in the sense that you understand would be of the highest priority. The second question, now the scenario is slightly different here. This is a national grid failure scenario. So in terms of a national grid failure, Eskom says that power may be restored between 3 and 17 days, and they cannot give a definitive answer, and it's right, because until you have a national grid failure and understand the cause and the region and proximity to where that cause is, as to how quick it can be fixed and restoration can take place, and those 3 phases kick in to bring the country back up to power. So in this question, what I'm asking for is if you know that's the case, there's national grid failure, so there's no Eskom supplied power. You may have your own generators, bearing in mind there may be challenges on the supply of diesel should we hit a national grid failure. But I mean, these are things you can consider. Is how long would it be if you didn't have power that it would be catastrophic for the organization? And what catastrophic means is that you go out of business, that you are considering closing the doors. That's catastrophic. So laying off people is not catastrophic unless you're laying off the entire workforce, which then close the door. So, would that take 3 days of no power, 10 days no power, 15 days, 17 days? And, just maybe to give context, is that if you consider the laundry shop down the road, they are highly reliant on power, and in most cases, a small business does not necessarily have generators. So a small laundry business could quite well survive 3 days, because that's like a long weekend. But given that it's gone through load shedding, and currently with stage 4, we lose 6 hours a day. So, with that, is a laundry is probably only operating for 60% of the day anyway. So, they're on edge. So it's highly unlikely that lasts beyond 10 days. So that's sort of context for that question, if that helps. Then the final question we'd like a little bit of collective thought on is, during the past 12 months, so based on your experience in the last 12 months, what was impacted the most during load shedding, or if you're an organisation that has a load curtail agreement with Eskom, what was the most impacted thing for your organisation? And this one's a bit of a tricky one. We're just asking for one word. And if a word is chosen more than once, when we look at it on the survey, it will be bigger than the others. So it gives us an idea of what's really on people's mind, particularly in terms of load shedding. Right, I'm hoping I've described the questions good enough. I mean, I'll talk through the survey as we go along as well. So I am now going to stop presenting so we can just open the survey. Cheryl, are you good to go with the survey?
Yes, I have launched it. Everyone should be able to see the survey on their screen.
So I'll be quick to mention as well. Please note that you can scroll down. So on scenario 1, load shedding is, if you scroll down, you'll see the rest of the options, which there should only be one option. So you have arrows to the right to move the priority up or down. So as you see that question, please feel free to move anything up and down. So if you think financial markets is your top priority, please move it to the top of the list, and so on. So if it's social unrest, and if social unrest is number 2, then just move it into second position. Once you've done that, click on the arrow at the bottom right corner. You'll see there's a 1 of 3, so there's 3 questions, and that will take you to the next question. So I'll give you a bit of time on the first one. Should be quite quick, just to move them up and down. You're not writing anything in, just a selection up and down. So again, just the question is, you are in stage 8 load shedding, you only have 50% power for the next week. Where do you think your priorities are going to be as an organisation? The second question is the scenario, this time it's national grid failure. There is no power. So power will be restored, and in this case, assume that it'll be after 17 days or on day 17. Please then choose how long you think your organisation can continue before it has to close doors or make very severe decisions. And then
I see it changes as everyone votes. It's quite good, Michael. So you actually see the results even on your own screen. Obviously, it's anonymous, but as people vote, it shows the results. There's 13 responses so far.
Excellent. 13 through the 3 questions, or just through the first question, Jono?
13 through all 3 questions. I think it only. Obviously, when people submit, I think that's when it updates everything. So there are 14 responses now.
Excellent. So we have about 38 people on board. So it'd be great just to get a couple more responses. Just to talk through the last question again. So question 3, one word for what was most impacted in your organisation during the last 12 months of load shedding. And hopefully we still have everyone on board, given that we are going through stage 4 load shedding. What happens with the virtual meetings like this is that people tend to disappear every time again and then come back on.
There are 27 responses now.
Okay, so we'll give another 30 seconds and let's get to the interesting part and have a look at the poll. Okay, it looks like 29 responses. So thank you. I mean, this is a great response. So collective thought is really great. And so what I'm giving back to you is the thoughts around the virtual room, which is fantastic. I mean, this is an information share, so it's actually quite nice that we all get to contribute and share our thoughts. Okay, I am going to...
There's still a few coming in, Michael. There's 31 now.
Okay.
That's close to everyone now.
Gosh, great response. Thanks, everyone. You're stars. I'm going to make sure that you attend all the other virtual meetings I do as well. Okay, John, I think we've got 31. That's a great response.
Yeah.
Better than I expected, so thank you very much. Let's do a quick view, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen. Right, let's go back to this. Right, unfortunately, I can't make the screen bigger just on the polls, but we've got a great sense of what we have here. So let's see, we've got, in terms of stage 8 load shedding, so if we only have power for 50% of the time, is that people think communications, data and voice, interesting. So interesting, but not surprising in terms of that. So the general feel around the room is that we can't live without WhatsApp and emojis. So that's interesting. But no, more seriously, this is a great element. So just to talk around communications is that a lot of organizations have considered the satellite phones in case of total communication failure. Some have considered Starlink. So, just a heads up on Elon Musk's Starlink is that it's not licensed in South Africa. So those that use it buy it outside of the borders and then use a roaming license or roaming usage on it. That's another one. And then Garmin. Garmin have also brought out a device that you can text, and you can, so whoever you're going to text to obviously needs a corresponding Garmin device as well. And the Garmin talks at Bluetooth to your phone, so your hand device, and you then text back and forth to each other based on GPS and the satellite system. So that's quite interesting as well. So if you are looking for alternatives to the usual communication system, there are a couple for you. The next one being lack of availability of fresh or potable water. Yeah, absolutely. Couldn't agree more. Funny enough, is we can live without electricity. We cannot live without water, and particularly fresh water. So the third one being health crises. Yes, because there's subsequent issues to polluted water, disease. It places a load on hospitals and our emergency services. And bear in mind, they are also going to have the impact of lack of power for in this case 50% of the time. So we have a already burdened system, which will be overburdened in this case as well. So that makes sense. Social unrest. So people are more concerned about civil disobedience, strikes, looting than financial markets, the transactions and so on and things like that. So that actually interesting because, if we had more people from the financial sector on, might have a slight difference in that, but very, very interesting. So thanks. John, I'm hoping everyone can see the poll as I've shown it, yeah?
Yes, we can. Yeah.
Okay, great. I'd had to be talking through all of this and not showing it. Okay, great. Alrighty, so here's another interesting sort of bell curve, which has got a pretty sharp end on the 10-day portion. So again, thank you for your responses. And this is what you are saying, is if there's a national grid failure and it takes Eskom 17 days to restore the grid, is that 70% of the organizations in the virtual room are out of business. So that, that's quite a horrifying thought, but it also hopefully spurs people into action in terms of how do we build our resilience, how do we last a bit longer. And again, just to qualify the 3 to 17 days, the purpose of showing the examples of other countries was that in many cases a national grid disruption or disturbance has been rectified in 24 hours, 48 hours. So, if you can make it past the 3 days, I'm pretty concerned about the 16% in the 3 days. To those, I would suggest, yes, definitely look at the resilience. I've done this poll before, and there are certain businesses that just cannot survive without power. They will shut without power. So, if you're one of those businesses, understood, and also I'm sure you understand the risk of your organisation on the reliance of availability of power. But great. So I really hope this has been helpful to everyone who's participating today, so that you get a good sight of this, and that you can compare what you put in as to most people are saying 10 days. So we can last a week and a long weekend, and as long as we've got power back in, we're not necessarily good to go, but we will survive and thrive. Right, last question on the oh, lovely. This looks so great. Thanks. Look at that. So productivity comes out clear. So very interestingly, and I'm going to go a little bit sideways, but the Mauritian economy has been hampered due to load shedding in South Africa. And part of the reason of this is retail sales in South Africa has been down in certain segments, of which the Mauritian economy relies on the export from Mauritius to South Africa. So the fact that we've had load shedding in South Africa has actually impacted the economy and productivity of another country. So productivity isn't just limited to our borders. That's amazing. So definitely. So let's look at some of the others. So economy, most definitely. So I think the CPI figures came out just recently, higher than expected. I think it's 5.9%. Scary unemployment rates in South Africa. Economy not great. If we had more reliable power, it would definitely help. Doesn't solve the problem, it helps. Turnaround times, not sure if that's turnaround times in delivery to clients and supplier, but yes, turnaround times, absolutely. Network, internet, yes. So one of the great things that came out of the pandemic was the remote work from home. However, load shedding creates a bit of a problem there. For a lot of people have resilience for a couple of hours in terms of working from home, network and internet. But when we go into more severe load shedding, not so much. It starts to become a bit of a problem. So production, Inconvenience, yeah, sure. If you're trying to cook dinner, you've got load shedding between 6 and 8 at night, and you've got kids, and you want to cook dinner, definite inconvenience. From a business perspective, most definitely. And with traffic lights being out, wherever you go, it takes more time to get there. So many reasons, yeah, absolutely. Cash flow, yes. Load shedding has hampered business in South Africa, relating back to economy. Employees, I'm not sure which part of employees, and look, employees are affected by it in the individual rights, at home, employees for work, productivity relating to employees. So yes, absolutely. So thanks for that. Connectivity, water and sanitation, traffic, spoke of, productivity and efficiency, client service levels, finances, service, absolutely. So by and large, productivity is the one that's been most hampered. So my challenge to you is that if you consider going forward in terms of continued load shedding, what are the ways to challenge that risk to productivity? Have thoughts around that. Right, so thank you very much for doing the poll. I think it was very informative. I enjoyed that a great deal. I'm just going to wave my magic wand so I get the sequencing right of these next things. And I'm just going to move back into, see if this does the trick. Oops. Let's get back to you. Very folks. Missing this one up.
We can see the slides,
Yeah,
Michael. No, it's just not in presentation mode, but it's fine.
Thanks. I'm just getting it back to where I was. I just wanted it in presentation mode, so there we go. Sorry about the inconvenience. Right, so we should be back there. Right, so just in terms of the that one where we looked at communications, lack of availability, fresh potable water, health crises, is what I would sort of again challenge people to is consider. I've put them in the sequence that they've been ranked. So communications was the top one, and as we sit today, we're in stage 4, and stage 4 means we have 75% availability of power in the cycle. And generally, so I've got it green because generally we can still work, we can still operate. I would recommend that you look at these risks in terms of the scenarios and impacts as we go down the line. So at stage 6, we have 63% power availability, and at stage 8, we have 50%. So from a communications perspective, and we know when we get to the extreme, there's no connectivity, there's no communications. So as you see the deterioration in communications from the next stage to the next, is what are the plans have you got in place for the organisation? And similarly, so fresh potable water, a key risk for also the health and safety of employees and people in general, communities. So at 75% as we are today, we are still getting water. I sort of contend that as to, even in businesses as normal, some of the municipalities there's a huge amount of wastage, broken pipes and the like. And we still have challenges getting water to individuals, communities, even in the green. So as we move to 50% power availability, and say water not getting into reservoir towers, what do we look at? What's the scenario? So obviously severe water shortages. and we're going to have to sort of make a plan around how we supply water. One positive on this is that South Africans are resilient. Western Cape and Cape Town specifically almost got to day zero. They've practiced this already. These processes in place. For the rest of us, we also need to consider Eastern Cape has been in drought for many years now, and most people have JoJo tanks outside the house. So there are ways to deal with this, and we can actually take lead from some of the other provinces in terms of some of the mitigation process put in place. Health crises, yes, this is a country-wide thing, and obviously will impact our organisations as our employees are impacted or get ill. And again, we get to 50%, and I think 50% should be red as opposed to amber, just in the case of we're already struggling to treat water, and then to get to that point. Then the social unrest is, we've seen it before, definitely in KZN. What happens in extreme circumstances is communities and businesses come together for support. And the recommendation here is don't wait for the incident to happen. Is start putting those communities and networks together prior to something happening. And financial markets, so it didn't rank as high as the others in terms of the survey. So here we're talking about a scenario of access to general banking, cash, and then market services, the SWIFT payments and things like that being disrupted. And again, today, as we sit in stage 4, it's almost business as usual, not quite, but almost business as usual. But as we have less and less power and there are more outages and connectivity, is we then start looking at physical security, cyber security, vulnerabilities come through, particularly where there's a lot of remote working. There's vulnerabilities, cyber vulnerabilities in remote working. And potentially at that stage, you get to a run of cash on the bank because people now are concerned about not being able to transact electronically. They actually want cash under the mattress or cash under the couch to make payments in the future. And it's a security thing as well, because it's about food. People want to be able to buy food and water. So I've flitted through them. The important point on this is that we look at each risk and then each scenario of stages of power availability. Then just further, so we've only touched on 5, and I just used the 5 out of the quick summary I did earlier. But for you just to consider in terms of going forward is risk categories. Look at people, the safety and security, infrastructure. We've had the water. We looked at health crisis. We looked at communications. But also, what about the normal operations and the manual workarounds you have within the organisation? So technology. Had some interesting conversations with organisations that are saying, well, they're going to keep data outside of the country because if we have a national grid failure and everything fails, at least they've got copies of data. They can get on a plane, if they can get on a plane, go outside the border and carry on working. So it's just some alternate thoughts of what's the resilience factor that we're building in. Cybersecurity, definitely. So cybersecurity is a huge risk, business as usual. In a vulnerable state, it's even worse. And supply chain. So whatever's happening to you is highly likely happening to your supply as well. So just consider what is going to happen to your supply chain through this process as well. And if you really want to go to the nth degree, what about your third-party supply chain too? How do they get impacted? Financial markets we touched on, and then societal behaviour. So going back to strikes, looting, general unrest. And then the last one on the list, and again, not necessarily this is the entire list, but last one on the list is diesel availability, because I've had a number of companies say to me, well, that's actually no problem. We have generators, we have a large amount of diesel supply, and we've got a preferred agreement with a supplier of diesel. But if there's a national grid failure, or if we are in extreme load shedding and the government commandeers the supply of diesel, there's not really much they can do about that. And on a smaller scale is that the service stations operate on electricity to pump petrol, diesel. If there's no electricity, they're not pumping. So, there's a couple of challenges to the thought process that, don't worry, we have generators, we have diesel, we're fine. You're only fine for a short while, as long as that tank holds. And also, how often do you check the level of the tanks? And what's your minimum? Do you keep it at 50% as a minimum, 25%? Because in worst case scenario, should you get to an extreme event and you're at 25%, you obviously don't really have much of a cushion. So some of the categories, or some of the things to consider. And also just consider the cost of business per day. So if there is no power, or if there's little power, again, I've seen companies come back and say, if we cannot operate, it's going to cost the company more than 100 million rand a day. And collectively, you can imagine what that does to the South African economy. Another factor is well, not only the lost revenue, but what are the costs to continue business without power, such as generators, maintenance, and diesel, simple example. So, in that case, how much are you willing to spend on resilience is, that's sometimes how long is a piece of string, because you cannot put all resources into building resilience, but there's got to be an appropriate resource allocation for that on resilience. And then one of the last considerations for this morning before we go into questions is what we found as well, that business continuity thinking hasn't caught up. And what I mean by that is that in days of good power, organizations had a generator as a backup. But now you're using your generator almost as often as you're using supplied power. So your generator actually becomes business as usual. So what backup do you have for the generator, which used to be a backup, but is now part of business as usual? So just in terms of your thinking around business continuity and that resilience, has it changed from 10 years ago? So consider that. And I think one of the last 2 points is in terms of takeaways. So we've spoken around the risk categories to look at. So severe load shedding is going to have a very similar symptom to national grid failure. So be aware of that movement. And on that is NERSA has proposed to change the load shedding stages from 1 to 16 as opposed to the current 1 to 8. And what that does mean is at stage 16 is that you'll only have 20% power during a cycle. So you will not have power for 80% of the time. So they've evened it out such that a stage 1, which currently you have power for 95% of the time. So it's very similar in the current to the new proposed load shedding stages. Where we get to stage 8, we currently have power for 50% of the time, but the NERSA recommendation is 60%. But then it gets down to 20% at stage 16. So I guess the cause for concern is that if we had 8 stages of load shedding to 50%, why would we now take 16 stages to provide power 20% of the time if 50% was good enough? So just something to watch out for. As I mentioned, some of the scenarios, look at your business risks in a scenario situation. Look at your business continuity plans, make sure update. And also opportunities is, the whole fundamental business equation is risk for reward. So where there are risks, there are quite often opportunities. So reassess. I mean, if you look at the renewable energy industry, your solar industry is booming in South Africa, thanks to the situation we find ourselves in. So always look for the positive in the risks that we've looked at as well. And ultimately, if you walk through the scenarios, you look at where you can build the resilience, look for the opportunities, you can build that resilience, you can build that agility within the organization, such that when you identify that opportunity attached to those risks, you can pounce on those opportunities and survive and thrive into the future. So, Jono, that's me for the time being. Thank you very much. Thank you to everyone on the call this morning. I hope it's been informative. I hope it's something you can use. Feel free to contact me if you want to discuss anything, and I'm sure we'll go into a quick question session. Thanks, Jono.
Yeah, thank you, Michael. Sure, it's a scary situation, but I suppose the human natures, we'll get through anything. But it's also the knock-on effects of business. I mean, you got to sell your services to someone else, so we're all in it together. You know, if we don't have clients, we don't have a business. So if our clients also fail, then we fail as well. So that's the frightening thing, like you mentioned, even the Mauritian knock-on effects. So, but let's
definitely. Sorry, John. I mean, the knock-on effects to our neighbours as well is they're significant in terms. You know, you said poor us. You know, it's like we battling with this, but has other impacts. And also another thing is it's sort of a collective good job. Is if we do move to the extreme and that we do have only 50% of power availability or available, or we get to MRSA where the stage 16 and you only have 20%, we actually all have to come together to survive and move forward. And I think that's a very important element of this as well, is that going forward is that collaboration, the networks we actually will make the difference should we go to the extreme.
Yeah, thanks. I think everyone's unmuted now, but if you can put your hands up if you'd like to ask any questions. Then we can take them in order. I think everyone's just shocked. I suppose we've been shocked for some time, but you try and forget about problems, and it is flipping scary. Yeah.
You know, the great thing is, I see a hand has been raised, but just a quick point is that we've actually gone through wave and wave and wave of various events, extreme events, whether it's social unrest, it's power outages, water failures, that slowly but surely we become resilient. But every now and again, we need to take stock of where we are and reassess where we are.
Yeah, Amanda, go for it. I mean, you're from City of Cape Town, so you've had... You've been through drought, so
yes, we've been through drought. Now, actually, Michael has now said what I wanted to say. We do become more resilient. We actually do also. What I like about hearing what Michael is saying is that you know, building on the opportunities, it makes us actually look for the positives. It doesn't make it right, though. It doesn't make it right that we struggle with electricity and so on. We would like to know more. We would like not to spend money on all these extras, but rather spend money on better service delivery. But I guess that is the where we are, but I just wanted to say that I really appreciate the positiveness that you brought to the end. That is best we can do. I think that helps us get through this situation much better.
Yeah, thanks, Amanda. Thank you.
Thanks, Amanda. Yeah, you know, the whole thing, it's a two-sided coin. There's risk and opportunity. Always look for the opportunity inside of risk. And then, you know, just in terms of the amount of money that people are, you know, is between MTN and Vodacom, they've spent billions in terms of improving the security of the telecom towers. So one, it's gone into making it more resilient in terms of power, so batteries and generators. But because that becomes an attractive target that people actually want to steal the stuff, they now concrete batteries into these telecom towers, and they spend so much money on this. So if we worked in a perfect world, they wouldn't have to spend any of that money on that. Those resources could go for the good. Likewise, can you imagine if we had a stable supply of power, the positive impact to the economy, reduction in unemployment, that all has knock-on effects. So yeah, if we lived in that perfect world, it would be all sunshine and happiness.
Are there any other questions for Michael? I think, as I say, we're going to put the recording does go up on our website. The slide pack goes up on the website. I also do a write-up. So if you just look on our website, you'll find it. I think, Cheryl, do we send for the people that actually attended, I think we might send them an email as well. I'm not sure if you do that.
I currently don't, but I think if you guys just keep an eye out on our website, it should be there in the next few days or next week at least.
Yeah, and I think if you want to get hold of Michael, I mean, Michael, you obviously spend a lot of time with companies with resilience plans. So,
Yeah.
you know, sometimes as you're going through those things, I think about our small business and, you know, what we would do, which we obviously have got a plan, but I don't know whether it doesn't cater for National Grid blackout, that's for sure. So, yeah. You know.
So, yeah, John, just in terms of organisations looking at what they should do, I strongly recommend the scenario planning, and not just to do one. So, do worst case, but then also do that 50%.
Yeah.
You know, what are the different impacts on the organisation, and just go through the scenarios. There's lots of information out there. So.
Yeah. Thanks, Michael. Thanks.
But otherwise, John, thanks very much for the opportunity to discuss National Grid failure and severe load shedding. I hope we move out of load shedding stage 4 soon. With hope. Yeah, but well, thanks for the time.
Yeah, no, thank you, everyone. And thank you, everyone, for joining us. Thank you. Have a great day, everyone. In the heat, I'm sweating here.